Guys, I have made hundreds of videos on chess openings, but today I want to teach you 5 fundamental endgame concepts that are very important for you to learn. Look, if you understand these, I guarantee that you will win many more games because these rules will simplify King-Pawn Endgames for you. Okay, so let's get started, but before we begin, a big shout out to BetterHelp, the paid partner for this video. Alright, take a look at this position. All I want you to do is think a little and tell me if it's safe to take this pawn all the way up. I mean, can I get a queen before this black king can catch me? So guys, pause the video, take your time and let me know what you think. Well, there are two ways to help you make this decision. The first one is pretty obvious. You calculate each and every move. Just imagine the pawn going up and then imagine the king moving towards it and see if that works. Like if I'm going here, then the king could go one step, the pawn moves another step, and then you do that in your head and see if that pawn gets there before the king. To some people, this is going to be confusing, to some maybe not. But one thing is for sure, this method of calculation is going to take you a lot of time, which is not something you want. At Chess Talk, we want to make things simple. So here, we should actually use a very basic and important concept, the rule of the square. And what we are going to do is that we'll imagine the pawn making just one move. Now I know that my pawn is going to jump 2 squares since it's his first move, so let's imagine pawn to g4. And at this point, we are going to create a square around this pawn. And how do we do that? Well, you simply draw a diagonal line all the way to the end of the board. And that's going to give you your square. We simply connect this line to where our pawn is. And that helps us draw this square. Now this is going to be your square, your box, and the point is that if this king is able to make it into the box when he makes his next move, then he's going to catch the pawn. If he doesn't, then he won't be able to stop the pawn. It's that simple. So at this point, he's not going to make it. Now whenever I move the pawn again, you will see that our box keeps shrinking. So now it's smaller, and every time the king moves, he's never going to be able to make it in the box. Our box keeps getting smaller, the king moves here, and finally the box has only 4 squares, and that's why the king cannot get the pawn. And just like that, we got a queen just in time. And from here, it's an easy king and queen checkmate. Now this is the rule of the square. Let's just quickly go over it one more time. But this time, let's say the black king is not on a7, but he's here on b7. Now if you're thinking of promoting this pawn, let's imagine you start with 2 steps forward, and now if we draw the box, this is how it's going to be. Notice how this time the king gets into the box in one move, and that tells us that he's going to get to this pawn. So if we keep pushing, he's getting in the box every single time. And eventually, as you can see, he captures the pawn. So in a case like this, instead of pushing the pawn right away, a better option would be to bring our own king into the game in order to help this pawn promote. Okay, now this was a very basic example to help you understand the rule of square. Now let me show you a practical endgame where this concept will actually help you calculate better and find hidden tactics. Look at this position. On first glance, it seems that white is in trouble because he might not be able to promote this pawn. The reason why pushing the pawn to a4 does not work is because now if we draw the square, we see that this is the box, and when it's black's move, he is just in time to get into the square. So he will eventually catch the pawn. Now if white plays a5, king d5, he's once again in that square. a6, king c6, a7, king b7, and there's the problem. Okay, now if we go back and let's say you're playing as white, there's actually a very clever idea where you can use the knowledge of the rule of square and you can gain a match winning advantage as white. So can you find the winning idea for white? Well, the killer move here is pawn to d5. And guys, if you could find this move, then hit that thumbs up button because that will tell me that you guys are really smart and you are learning from my videos. So smash that like button right now and let's see how many of you got this right. Okay, now after this brilliant move d5, black has to accept the sacrifice because if he does not, then this pawn will just march forward and promote to a queen. Therefore, he has to capture the pawn on d5. And only after this, now we play a4. So once again, we draw the square, and of course, black can get into the square, but after a5, we now have this new square. And now we begin to understand why the d5 pawn was sacrificed. Black's only way of getting into the square is to play the move king to d5, but as you can see, his own pawn is standing in his way. Therefore, he won't be able to stop us. We keep running up the board, and as you can see, white simply wins the race. Now, even though this might appear to be a very advanced endgame position, if you understand this very simple rule, the rule of the square, you can easily visualize the outcome, calculate faster, and make better decisions. Alright, the rule of the square was just one of the important rules, but there are 4 more endgame concepts that I want you to know. But before we learn these fundamental concepts, I would like to talk about BetterHelp, the paid partner for this video. Guys, recently in the chess world, there has been immense pressure on players like Gukesh and Ding Liren, leading to overwhelming stress. Any one of us can go through such anxiety from external pressures and expectations. In such times, we need a good therapist who can help navigate these emotions, break down our feelings of hopelessness, and create a personalized plan for our growth. Well, finding the right therapist can be a daunting experience, but BetterHelp makes it easy for you. All you have to do is fill out a questionnaire, and based on your answers, you'll be matched with a suitable therapist. The best part about BetterHelp is that it is fully online, which makes it very convenient and comfortable. With BetterHelp, you get access to a diverse network of professional therapists with a wide range of specialties. And if it's not the right fit, you can easily switch therapists anytime at no extra cost. And plus, BetterHelp's customer support team is always there to help you. With over 7,000 reviews and a rating of 4.5 on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. So if you're feeling stuck, anxious, or just stressed and you need therapy, then BetterHelp is the place for you. Just click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/chesstalk, and using this link, you'll get 10% off on your first month. So guys, do check out BetterHelp, and now let's get back to the video. Alright, let's move on and evaluate the current position. How would you play here if you were white? Now you might be tempted to push your pawn forward because you want to promote, and fundamentally that's how you win this endgame. But that is already a mistake because that just leads to a draw. So here's the next concept you must know. Look, in such king-pawn endgames, your king always leads the way. Your king needs to be in front of the pawn. Think of it this way. Your king is the leader of the army. He has to show the way. Your king should be the one taking control of these squares and making sure that your pawn is able to move forward. So your king has to be in front of the pawn, and that's the most important principle of all these endgame positions. Alright, now this current position also brings up another important point which you must remember. Look, as soon as you get your king on the 6th rank in front of the pawn, you are just winning. It doesn't matter whose turn it is now. It doesn't matter where your opponent's king is. Nothing matters. This is simply winning for white. Now let's say, for example, if it is black to play, he can go anywhere. Doesn't really matter. You just advance your king further because again, your king leads the way. And now that your king controls all these squares in front of the pawn, black cannot stop you from marching forward. Alright, in this position, even if it is white to move, again, your victory is pretty much obvious. You just play the most natural moves. Now your king cannot advance further, therefore you need to move to the side of the pawn, and after he does the same, you just push the pawn forward. He'll try to block you, but eventually his king is forced to move out of here, which again allows you to advance your own king forward, and on the next move, you promote to a queen and win the game. In this position, let's say even if your pawn is far behind the king, that's also not a problem. Because we now know the golden rule that as soon as your king enters the 6th rank and he's in front of the pawn, it is always a win for you no matter what. Therefore, even if your pawn is far behind, you just push it forward. And as you can see, after a couple more moves, we basically reach the same situation. We squeeze the king out, get a new queen, and just win the game. So king on the 6th rank in front of the pawn is always winning for white. But there is just one exception here. In case of the rook's pawns, this will not work. So in case of the A or H pawns, it doesn't matter if your king is on the 6th rank or not, it is still a draw. The issue here is that after we try to apply the same technique, at some point we reach this position where we can't squeeze the king out of this corner square. because this is the edge of the board and he can't go this way. There is just no space here. Therefore, the best you can achieve is just a stalemate. Anyway, in such king-pawn endgames, now we know what we should be aiming for. We want our king on the 6th rank and it should be in front of our pawn. So this is the ideal position we are aiming for. But how do you get there? Let's try to find out. Let's suppose this is one of our endgame positions. It is white's turn and now you need to find the best continuation for white. As we've already learned, our king needs to be in front of the pawn. Now we have a few options here. So where do we advance our king? Well, this brings us to our next important rule that you need to know. Look, if we play king e3 and if your opponent is smart enough, he'll try to keep control over these squares and he'll stop you from advancing your king further. Therefore, he'll go king e5 and now you cannot move forward. Even if you try moving to the side, he just does the same. And then again you're stuck and still there is no way for your king to make progress. Ultimately, you'll have to push your pawn, but that would go against our most critical rule that our king should lead the way and he should be in front of the pawn. Therefore, before making your moves in such situations, it is important for us to understand the concept of opposition. Now, opposition is the kind of a position where you approach the opponent's king right in the face, just like this, and you force him to move out of your way. For example, in this position, king to d3 is the best move because now you gain control over these 3 important squares, which means now you have the opposition and this forces black to make way for your king. Having the opposition is important because that allows you to penetrate into your opponent's territory. For example, here, black is in zugzwang. He has to make a move and give you that space. What can he do? Well, if he goes back in any direction, that's actually great for us because our goal is to advance our king. That's why if he retreats, you just march ahead with your king, and that's what we always wanted to do. Now, if your opponent refuses to go back and let's say he moves to any of these sides, then that allows us to still move our king forward. We call this the concept of outflanking your opponent. In this case, if he goes to c5, you outflank him by advancing forward with king e4. And if he goes to e5, you outflank him the other way with king c4. In outflanking, we are using the same principle that your king has to lead from the front. See how beautifully we've opened up this way for our pawn. Now again, black has to do something, and if he tries to move forward, you can simply start advancing your pawn. Therefore, he'll probably try to do something else and maybe retreat backwards. But when he does that, you'll keep winning the opposition, his king will slowly be pushed back, and you will just keep outflanking him. And whenever you get the opportunity, you can push your pawn forward, but just make sure that your pawn always stays behind your king. And again, our main objective is to bring our king to the 6th rank, and as soon as you're there, you will just win the game. Because after this, let's say he goes to d8, you can just place your king on d6 and achieve that ultimate winning position that we were always aiming for. Your king on the 6th rank in front of the pawn, and we know that this is completely winning. After this, you don't even need to think about opposition anymore because it's just straightforward. So whatever moves he plays, you'll set up this red carpet and this tiny little pawn confidently marches forward. She turns up into this beautiful queen and we simply win the game. Now, the best thing about understanding these concepts is that you can easily convert your endgames into winning positions. For example, if you're in an endgame like this, where you have a rook and a pawn, you can easily exchange the rooks to transition into a position that favors you, and this just helps you win more games. Okay, so we've looked at all these positions where you were the attacking side, where you had the advantage, but what if you're defending? What if you are playing as black in this position? Well, all these concepts will help you here as well. So here, we know that white wants his king to lead the way. He would ideally want to play king e4 or d4. So as black, your plan is simple. You just have to make sure that white cannot get his king to these squares. Therefore, king d5 is a great move because that prevents his king from advancing. You'll continue to stop his king from moving forward. So at some point, he will have to push his pawn. And once he does that, you just need to stay on the same file as the pawn. And just make sure that his king cannot get in front. So you keep taking the opposition, his pawn will continue to move, and eventually a time will come when his pawn will reach the 6th rank. That's when you need to stay on these two squares in front of the pawn. And only when his king tries to come in, you take the opposition and then you can force a stalemate. This is how you can draw a losing endgame. Alright, now based on all these concepts, here's a puzzle for you. In this position, it is white's turn and you need to find the best move continuation for white. Share your answers in the comments. Let's see how many of you get this right. Guys, do subscribe to the channel and I shall see you in the next one.